Miami Hurricane fans, this is Brian Smith. We have a verbal commitment from yesterday to talk about Artavius Jones out of Blountstown High School up in the Panhandle. Defensive tackle, 6'4", 305 pounds. A very, very talented young man, is now a part of the 2024 recruiting class for the Miami Hurricanes. This young man is somebody that kind of blew up after about January 15th, January 30th. Right in there, he started getting a little attention. UCF and some other schools offered him, and UCF was definitely in it throughout his recruitment. But if he hadn't been from Blountstown, I have a feeling that he probably would have had a bunch more offers earlier in the process. And that's just part of recruiting. Location, location, location. So who is this guy? What can he do? And why did Miami want to sign Jones? Well, here's what I know. From watching his film probably a half dozen times, 6'3", 6'4", he was 280-something, 290, something like that last year. But I was really surprised at how Blountstown used him. First off, number one, they used him at tight end, and he was actually pretty nimble out in the flat and running some patterns down the field. He'd block, and then they would just run a play action, and nobody would cover the guy that's the largest human being on the field. It was pretty funny, actually. More importantly than him catching the pass and scoring is how he ran. Jones was very nimble. I was surprised at just how nimble he was. He just seems like the kind of guy that you don't come across every day, because athleticism comes in many different forms, but it usually doesn't come with nimble and give or take 290. This is from last year. He weighs a little more now in the same sentence. And quite frankly, I was surprised that he did it over and over and over and over again, even against teams that were playing power football, trying to wear out the defensive front, watching the film. He's a kid that could still break down and bend and was willing to. That's also important. You got to be a willing participant to do it. And he could chase players laterally after he made it past the first line of blockers, break down, bend at the knees, not the waist, not a waist bender, and go left or go right and follow the stream of players down the line of scrimmage, make his way to the ball carrier, wrap up, and bring him to the ground. Sounds pretty simple, but when you're that big, it's not that simple. That's why he had offers from programs like Georgia, LSU, Florida State, Miami. Numerous programs down south offered him and beyond. In short, you just don't find many packages that are that big that also have that much upside. Jones has both. So you can't teach the size, but his upside is still quite high because he doesn't even know how good he is yet, because he's pretty much just mauling kids at the 1A level. Blountstown, if I remember correctly, is 1A school. It's a little southwest of Tallahassee, about an hour. There are a lot of mosquitoes, alligators, and that's about all I got for where it's at. There's not much going on there. And quite frankly, he's going to, have a little bit of a culture shock when he gets to the University of Miami, because the players are so much bigger and stronger. I'm sure they'll put him against the really good players right away to see what he can do, because Miami's depth chart, I was just checking it a minute ago, they have a extremely high number of fourth-year players at D tackle, if not fifth-year kind of guys. Lichtenstein, I believe, is a fifth or sixth-year guy that transferred back from the University of Southern California. He played, I believe, at Cypress Bay in Weston when he was in high school. But everybody else, including Taylor, who's a junior, if he has a good year, I think he'll turn pro. They got Brandon, they got Dean. They got some other good players up front. I'm worried that Miami's going to get gutted with kids trying to get to the draft next year. And I understand, there's nothing that Cristobal and their staff can do about it. But that's why getting Jones was important. They're going to have to take, at minimum, a couple of guys in the portal at D tackle, which is really hard anyway, just to get through 24. It's going to be an in-between year. They need to find a junior college kid or something else, too, in this recruiting class. The more I look at it, they need at least 2 high school kids that are big, and they need a third kid. And quite honestly, that's a JUCO or a bigger kid that's been to college. And what I'm asking for, especially in today's world, is very hard, because most junior college kids are going to struggle with the transition to the college game, off the field issues, academics, whatever it was. They went to junior college for a reason, at least the vast majority. There are exceptions, but not many. Miami's in a very short way on the depth chart for 24 D tackle, and they know it. So it's important that Artavius is really good. I actually wrote down a couple of games yesterday. I'm hoping to go see him play. They play Perry County. It's a little bit closer to where I live, but he's remote. Perry County is kind of on the bend as you go around the edge, just south of Panama City, a little southeast. I might go see that game or something like that, but I want to see him live. I want to see what he's like when it's not just him mauling somebody. I want to see him have to chase guys, at least if he's destroying the offensive linemen that are probably not going to be up to par to play against him at Perry County, because not many kids are any school. I want to see what he does against guys that can really run. Perry County always has speed. So that'll be interesting. That'll be interesting. As for the rest of what's going on with recruiting, just a couple of quick notes. Caleb Odom is expected to commit today. I don't think he's going to Miami. I expect him to pick Alabama. It is what it is. He's out of Carrollton, Georgia, big-time player. Miami put in their best effort, but it is what it is. I mean, Alabama's obviously a big draw. If it's a shocker, it wouldn't actually shock me because so many kids have pulled surprises lately, including like JoJo Trader. Talked about him a little bit recently on this podcast, how he went out of his way to just randomly make a commitment. Boom, there it is. Didn't want to do a ceremony, didn't want to do anything else. I want to stay home. Here it is. So that's recruiting 2023. It's not always a circumstance where they have a ceremony. Other players coming up, it's kind of hard to say. I don't think there's anything quote unquote planned for ceremonies. Besides Odom off the top of my head that Miami has a really good shot at, but there are always chances for flips. There are always new offers. And more importantly, Miami might have some kids they set up visits with, like for the Texas A&M game, for the opportunity when they play Clemson at home. Those games, those visits, people need to pay particular attention to those because Miami's now at 18 commitments. They can be pretty picky at this point on which players they take. I'm not going to get into the star chasing game because the rankings are really, really off this year. There's been a lot of guys changing networks and stuff that the rankings aren't as up to date as they used to be. It's not a very good year for it in general. There's a couple of networks in particular I have some disdain for right now that I'll hold my tongue on. So I have friends with them, but it's really bad. So that being stated, I still believe that Miami is going to end up in the mid-20s, 22 to 25 range on how many kids they take, because kids are going to leave too. We haven't talked about it yet because it hasn't happened, but there's going to be somebody randomly in fall camp that's not happy that leaves. There's going to be somebody that gets injured in fall camp, their career ends, a scholarship opens. There will be more opportunities. So we'll see how that works out. Numbers-wise, I'm hoping they get at least one more, again, high school tackle, defensive tackle, to be clear. And I'd like to see them get a JUCO D-tackle if they could as well. I know I'm just throwing caution to the wind with that idea, but they need not only numbers, size, talent, they need everything at tackle. If they took 4 defensive tackles, I wouldn't have a problem with it because there's a good chance, again, a lot of guys are going to leave. I'm going to look at my depth chart again just to try to go through it. But like Leonard Taylor, good chance he leaves for the pros after this year. The question I have is, does Harrison Hunt come back? That's possible. Branson Dean, does he even have a 6th year with COVID? Maybe he does. I'm not sure. He's the transfer from Purdue. Thomas Gore, he's a kid. Maybe he could come back. Ahmad Moten's a very key player. We've talked about him a lot. Redshirt freshman out of Cardinal Gibbons, really big kid. I think he has a very bright future for the Orange and Green, but that's one body. You need 4 or 5 that are already experienced and healthy, et cetera, which Miami is going to be on the polar opposite end of next year. So let's see how those guys do. The other thing is Horton, the kid that's coming in from Langston Hughes just outside of Atlanta. He's going to have to play. Joshua Horton's a good player, but he's a freshman. You never like to really see freshmen play, but they need to get him some reps some way, come hell, come high water, so he's not just completely thrown into the fire in 2024. So I don't know how that's going to work out because they've got some pretty good talent on defensive tackle this year that's experienced, that's been through the program in the spring with the coaching change at defensive tackle, or excuse me, defensive coordinator. Guidry is now there. I think it'll go pretty well. They'll be a little better on defense than what I originally thought. Kind of going through the numbers, seeing them in spring ball. I'm not as concerned as I once was. It's not ideal by any means, but that's, again, why recruiting D-tackle is so important. So what's next? The only thing else I really want to talk about with recruiting, and it relates to Josiah Trader, excuse me. I don't know how they're going to play out receiver completely. I know they're still trying to flip Wayne McCoy, Jeremiah Smith. But is there anybody else they're really in the mix with? At some point, everybody I've talked to believes that McCoy is going to end up at Miami. I've heard 100 different things on him. It could be in 5 minutes. It could be on December 5th. None of it would surprise me. But is there anybody else? Because they still, like D-tackle is number one on the board for position. Getting Josiah was big, though, to help alleviate that point number 2 with the receiver, just getting depth, having consistency throughout the roster and some balance with classes. If they could get one more big receiver, and I know I've said this about 10 times on podcasts, it would be very helpful. And I want them to get Wayne McCoy because he's just a good football player. But at the same time, they need another 6'2", 6'3" guy that can really play, an instant impact kind of guy. Because, like I was mentioning at defensive tackle, there's a really good chance that Colby Young's going to leave after this year. I like Isaiah Horton, but he's a redshirt freshman. He hasn't really played much. Frank Ladson's a senior transfer, hasn't done a lot. Michael Redding, is he going to be ready? I don't know. Like, has he, what's his health status and where's he at in terms of being able to play? I have no clue. Those are a couple bigger guys, but I don't think they have the speed and the all-around skills to be difference makers. I mean, it doesn't mean they can't be good, but we'll see. Horton's the one I have no idea. He's a really good player out of the state of Tennessee that I'm curious about, but he's playing behind Young, so it's going to be hard to get reps. I think Colby's going to have a really big year. Not worried about slot and flankers, not quite as big a deal, especially since Chance Robinson and Josiah Trader can both play it. I'm still really worried about boundary, though. We need, even if Horton is good, that's only one guy. You need 3. Again, Miami is short on numbers. Got to get more guys there. So maybe Chance Robinson can play it. I'm kind of curious about that. I've been thinking about that a little more. He's give or take 190 to 200 pounds, somewhere in that range. He might be able to play it. You got to take on some pretty physical corners, be able to run block, be able to do a lot of things without help, because the boundary receiver position is generally just a guy by himself. There isn't a lot of clusters and different things. It can happen that way, but they usually leave him by himself. So that'll be interesting. And then finally, I don't think there's much left in terms of commitment dates involving Miami. So we need to really start thinking about the 25 class. While I'm not going to do it on this podcast, note a lot of the stuff that I talk about moving forward is going to be 25 related. August 1st is a very important date to that point. Per NCAA rules, college coaches will be allowed to call juniors, guys that are on August 1st, like they're going into the junior year. And you'll hear about so-and-so's visiting for the Miami of Ohio game or the Texas A&M game. Now I just got an offer from Miami. Florida State offered, Miami offered, etc. All August. It's going to be constant. You're going to see these things on social media. I don't think it's going to be a problem for Miami. They've got a great staff and trying to get after it and recruiting. That is the least of my worries. I'm just curious who it's going to be that specifically tries to get down for the A&M game. And I know this is hard because it's location. For those that don't really know, Miami is very secluded in the state. It's a long drive, even from Orlando, 3-4 hours. A lot of people don't want to deal with the traffic, etc. They need these underclassmen to take multiple unofficial visits to really get an idea of what it's like. Because Miami is different than any other part of the state, just to get a better feel for the school. I have no idea how many of the Central Florida and Northern Florida kids will come. That's important, though. Again, unofficial visits this fall. It sets up the parameter to get an idea for the coaching staff. Hey, we've got a shot at this kid or we don't. You don't want to waste your time or the kids. 25 recruiting really, I mean, it's started already with offers, but it really doesn't start until you can just call them. And that's August 1st. So those visits, Miami has 2 big home games. It's not the greatest home slate this year, to be honest. A&M, Clemson are the 2 best. I expect them to do everything in their power to get kids to come and do at least one unofficial visit, not to try to get them to both, because they need to do that and start reestablishing the in-state dominance in general. They've done a pretty good job this year, but the top of the board kids, there's just still not enough kids staying home. And that's not a Miami problem. That's an entire state of Florida problem. I'm working on some numbers. There's a couple more kids I want to see where they go. I mean, some will stay in state or not, but the number of players staying in state in Florida is still a problem, especially within the top 15 to 20 kids. It just is. So anyway, please like this podcast. Please subscribe and share. And finally, make sure you go ahead and comment if you got something you want to talk about. It could be something that I discussed today, or perhaps it's not. Maybe it's something that you want to hear about. Maybe it's a player that you haven't heard a lot of information on or want to know something more specific. I'm game. Just let me know if you want to talk about depth chart, X and O's, whatever it may be. Fire away. With that, everybody have a great day.